Let's talk now to Shelley Gilbert. She's the Chief Executive of Grief Encounter, a charity offering help to people grieving their loved ones. Thanks for joining us, Shelley.
Hello, you're very welcome.
Hello there. Well, I mean, this Jimmy Saville case has been very difficult for the victims, and I imagine very difficult for the family and friends of Jimmy Saville. But I imagine that revelations, not necessarily as serious as this, but revelations about loved ones, it's not unusual with some of the people that you're dealing with in your charity. Absolutely.
And if I had £1 for every family that had secrets, I think I'd be very wealthy. And one of our messages is that family secrets is not necessarily very helpful because it doesn't leave the people left behind any chance to find any resolution to their shock.
Yes.
And often, as with the Saville family, accompanied by a lot of shame and guilt. And the families are left behind, and we help them pick up the pieces.
Well, indeed, and you haven't gotten a chance to say, well, why did you do this? Or, I mean, what about the widows or the widowers who discover when going through, personal documents after the death of their husband or wife that actually, they've led a double life, or that they've had a secret long time affair,
Exactly.
or for instance had children that they'd never talked about from a past relationship. How do these people, when they come to you with those sort of stories, how do they cope, and how do they resolve things?
I think it's helpful psychologically to think of this in two different phases. And the first phase we call the phase 1, which is trauma work. So if you think about the initial reactions of shock or maybe denial, splitting, and then you split your emotions, your thoughts and behaviours. As in trauma work, a big example of that will be like intrusive memories or not being able to sleep or flashbacks. Then we see it as you moving into phase 2. So this could take, months. It's not a day's work or week's work. Where it's less trauma work and the way of thinking about how we manage trauma, but into one of competency mode, where we now have to adjust to our new lives. And this is where the family, for example, the Saville family, or families that discover these terrible secrets, can somehow manage to still memory make and fill the empty spaces, but in a less angry way, a less difficult way, because nobody's perfect.
And yet it's easy to say, look, we all probably, if we think about it, have issues in our own families or even indeed in our own, intimate relationships. And yet to find out sort of something earth-shattering, like, for instance, an affair or Hugh Jets. I have a very good friend who's a member of their family discovered after their husband had died that there were just massive debts. They just had no idea that there was, every single thing had been mortgaged to the hilt again and again and again, and thought she was left in a financially sort of okay position, and actually the house has got to go, the business has got to go, everything's got to go. There is no money left, and she's going to be left pretty much destitute. And there will be families and couples where these secrets are kept for decades, won't there?
Yes, in actual fact, I hadn't thought of it before, Julia, but that's exactly what happened in my own family. What was covered up, my mother died from breast cancer when I was 4.
Oh, gosh.
And we weren't, in inverted commas, allowed to talk about her. And one of the reasons why we weren't allowed to talk about her, apart from sparing me from the adults thinking they were sparing me from the pain, was that there was quite a lot of scandal involved with my mother's sisters and children and all sorts of things going on, and the men being cut out photos and altering dates of marriages and all sorts of things.
Goodness,
but because they imagined in that generation there was all the shame and guilt and blame, perhaps, those issues weren't explored, and the long-term effect was that nobody spoke about my mother, and I was left with these huge empty spaces. Not knowing anything about her childhood, about how she met my dad, because it was all enshrouded in these family secrets. And it's just not helpful.
Much better if everyone's open and people have a chance to sort of talk about things, no matter how bad it might seem at the time. Shelley Gilbert, thank you so much for joining us. She's Chief Executive of Grief Encounter. They are a charity helping people who have been bereaved, helping them come to terms with things. They're offering a lot of fantastic help. So if you are touched by any of the issues we talk about today, do get in touch with Grief Encounter. They're fantastic work that charity does.